So a lot of people really want to improve their listening skills, and especially in marriage and in conflict. And so that's what this video is all about: how to be a good listener. I think one of the first things I want to say is that I don't think listening comes natural, and so therefore I don't really think that most of us are very good at listening, including myself. Listening doesn't come natural because I think the natural thing that we want is to be heard ourselves and to feel like we have a safe environment, which is maybe we want to speak and we want to be heard. But with listening, we're reversing the process and choosing to be in the role of a listener and kind of placing ourselves in a secondary place. So I think one good way of thinking about listening is to ask yourself, when you're speaking to somebody, especially when you're talking to somebody about something that's really important to you, what do you want from that kind of encounter? And it seems to me that people typically want really three things. First of all, they want to be heard, the content of what it is that they're saying. But secondly, they want to be understood. They want to feel like what they are saying is understood. And so when you're listening, just being there as a listener and not saying anything back, you might as well just kind of be a bump on a log. And so it's good to listen, but it's also good to let the other person know that you understand what it is that they're saying. So therefore, some reflection back to let them know, yeah, I got it. I hear what you're saying. And then thirdly, I think most of us, when we want to be heard, is that we really want to be accepted for the experience that we share, or the thoughts that we share, or the feelings that we have, or an opinion that we have about something. And so this particular part about being accepted, I think, is really challenging, especially if it comes to something that we disagree with or we have a different opinion about, which is why I think listening is such a difficult thing to do. So I think with listening, the most important skill is really empathy. And empathy literally means to feel with, or to experience with that other person, whatever it is that they're experiencing. And so therefore, in order to be a good listener, we have to set aside our own experience, our own judgments. So there's a lot of obstacles to being a good listener, and some of those are, for instance, trying to encourage them. Maybe somebody says something that you think is good, then you want to encourage them. Oh, I think that's a great idea, or I think you did a really good job with that. And this might sound like a little kind of a subtle thing, but that's not really the role of listening, which is to accept the other person's experience. There's a role for affirming and encouraging somebody, but when it comes to the role of listening, we simply want to reflect back what this person is sharing with us. I think another obstacle to it, which is a very common one, I think that is even stereotypically so, especially I think men are often kind of branded as being fixers. But really, I think most people often put themselves in the role of being a fixer. Someone might share a problem with you, and you might feel this compulsion to want to fix the problem and to rush in with ideas. But again, as soon as we do that, we've left the role of being a listener to being a fixer, and we've kind of discounted what it is that they want to say, and we've become the expert in the situation and left the role of being a good listener. And thirdly is another obstacle to listening, I think, is judging their experience. A lot of times when we're listening to somebody, we're often listening for correctness. Do we agree with what it is that they're saying? Do we think that what they're saying is accurate? And so if we hear something we don't agree with, or that we think that they've got the facts wrong, we might feel very compelled to want to reach in and to correct them. But again, we're putting ourselves in the position of being the one that wants to be listened to. And we want to remove ourselves from that experience. I think one of the big fears of being a listener is that we're afraid that if we just really accept what this other person is saying, that they might get the wrong message that we are agreeing with them, or that we're condoning with what it is that they're saying or their opinion. But I just have to say that is the risk of being a listener, is that you really have to allow the other person to share their experience without placing your judgment on it. So I'm the first to say that I feel like that risk has to be made, or otherwise our listening will not be very good quality, because we've injected our opinion on them. When we inject our opinion or make a judgment about what it is that they say, implicitly, kind of what we're telling them is, I don't think I can entrust you to your own experience, therefore I have to help you interpret your reality so that I can fix you and make your world better. And so again, we put ourselves in the place of being the expert or being the fixer. We simply want to be the listener. So you can almost imagine for a second, if you were a ghost and you're in the listening position, if you could imagine yourself arising outside of yourself and going into the other person and sitting behind their eyes and looking at the world through their view, through the things that they say, the things that they feel. So you're doing the best you can to really just be in their world and leave yourself behind, to leave your own judgments behind. This doesn't mean that your judgments don't matter. It doesn't mean that you might not even somewhere, along the way share your opinion or your view on things. But we want that to be secondary. And that even may not even come into the picture at all if what we want to do is simply to listen. But I have a little bit more to say about that a little bit later. The other thing is that I think, which is real fundamental to me from my perspective, is that we tend to approach a conversation with somebody, especially if it's around a conflict or an opinion, is we tend to approach it from the perspective of right and wrong. And so automatically my radar goes up. Do I agree with what this person is saying? Are they right about this? Are they wrong about this? Oh, I just heard them say something I disagree with. I've got to file that away so I can bring it up later and let them know that I don't agree with them. And so so I think we have this natural tendency to do that, which is why I think that the name of the tree in the Garden of Eden is called the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. That tree is predictive of what would happen to us if we fell into our own judgments, if we fell into our own egocentricity and our own self-interest. That now our interactions with people would be primarily characterized by determining who's right, who's wrong, who's in, who's out, who's the Democrat, who's the Republican, who do I agree with, who I disagree with. Now I had to position myself in some ways with this other person so that I can make sure that I feel that I belong to the club that's right, and who are they, so I can determine where I'm going to put them in their club. And so what we're trying to do is eliminate that. Again, not that it matters, not that right and wrong doesn't matter, and not that even if this other person is totally wrong objectively, it's not that that doesn't matter, but we're putting that on the shelf right now, and we're asking ourselves, does this person have the experience of being fully heard and accepted by me? In fact, when it comes to a conflict in a relationship and in a marriage or with a friend, that's not something I even encourage us to say, hey, did you feel like I heard you? Did you feel like that I understood you and accepted your perspective, even though I might have a different one? So you might even imagine, like, if you were in the Garden of Eden and you were God, I was God, and we were watching this whole thing playing out. The tempter is coming up to Adam and Eve, and he's trying to talk them into eating from this tree. Now, maybe if I were God, or if you were God, you and I might go, well, let's see, I don't like the way this conversation is going. So I'm going to interject myself. I'm going to say, now you, serpent, I want you out of the garden. And Adam and Eve, remember what I told you? Why are you even considering the possibility of eating from this tree? But you see what's happening there. The freedom of the individual to express themselves is not being allowed. So apparently to God, it was worth the risk to allow people to express themselves, even at the expense of tragedy, even at the expense that they might have to learn throughout their whole lives because of the mistakes that they've made. So that's the risk that we take by being a listener is to allow the other person and to entrust the other person to be who they are and who they decide to be. And then I, as a friend, come along aside them as someone who's different, who has different opinions and different values, and accepts them exactly as they are. In fact, I might say that I think if I accept them as they are, I really think that puts me in the better position to influence them for good than for me to share my opinion with them. Because think about this idea. So what if every time your friend or your spouse comes to you and shares views with you, and they get to where they recognize, okay, well, I can't really talk about my views with them because they're going to tell me that I'm wrong, or they're going to try to fix me, or I know what their opinion is, they're going to assert it. And so you could imagine that at some point that person might stop sharing personal and important information because they don't have the belief that they're going to be heard. And so they kind of put you at a distance a little bit, and they only share bits and pieces of them that they feel like that they're not going to be judged by with you. So they present this person to you that's acceptable to you, which is not really who they are. They want to be accepted for who they are. But if on the other hand, we place ourselves in a position of accepting everything about this person, and no matter what they told us, we could accept it and we could receive it. And again, doesn't mean endorsement, doesn't mean agreement. It just means I accept them as they are. Because when we talk about unconditional love, that's what unconditional love is, right? It's unconditionally accepting people just as they are. We're not talking about whether we agree. We're not talking about whether we disagree. We're not talking about whether we condone their lifestyle. We're giving them the experience of being accepted. And so I think that places me in a great position, because then next time they'll know, well, gosh, I talked about this with Patrick or with you, and they really listened and they didn't judge me. And so they're going to feel much more free to be able to share themselves with you. And so if they get used to being able to believe that they can share themselves with you, they will subconsciously quite often feel like, well, you're the kind of person that I think I want to be, and therefore end up adopting your values. But if I just come to somebody telling them that they're wrong about the way that they think and telling them what they ought to think, that's not going to feel very good to them. It's not going to be very empowering, because ultimately people want to and will choose their own way, even if they have to hide it from the people that they love. So just one of those small example of what I have in mind about this. Let's just say, for instance, a husband and wife are having a disagreement about whether we need to buy a new car or not. And the wife says, hey, I've got my eye on this car. It's $25,000, and I think it's pretty, and I think it smells good, and I'm a little nervous about the safety of the older one that I have, and so I'd really like to go buy this car. And so the husband might very well say, for instance, well, we really can't afford that right now, and I'm not comfortable with that, where our budget is, and so I think that we need to put that off for a few years. Well, obviously that was not listening very well. But if I place myself in the position of being the listener without giving up my opinion, I could say to her, gosh, it sounds like you're really concerned about safety, and you want to be in a vehicle that you can trust, and so you don't have to worry about whether this vehicle is going to break down on you, and that really matters a lot to me too. Now, that last little sentence wasn't necessarily listening, but it was me validating that person's experience a little bit. And so that way that person is more likely to be open to be influenced by me, and for us to have a good conversation. So just to conclude, I'll say that something you can always kind of ask yourself is, after coming out of a conversation that's, especially if it's emotionally charged, to ask yourself, did I give this other person the experience of being heard, or did I inject myself into this? You're welcome to look around in Relationships Universe at other videos. I've got other ones about communication that will be coming online as the weeks go by. Thanks for listening.